What if the person lying next to you isn't really human in the way you are? What if their eyes hold no true presence, just reflections like a mirror with no memory? You felt it, that strange emptiness, that subtle chill when they speak with perfect logic, but zero soul. Not everyone you meet is awake, and no one warned you about that. You were never told that some bodies walk this world with no anchored spirit. That certain people can mimic love, laughter, even pain, without ever feeling it. The truth is ancient, hidden in sacred texts and buried psychological research. And 99% of people will deny it until it's too late. But you're not here by accident. You've sensed it before, and now the signs are calling louder than ever. This is your chance to unlock what they hoped you'd never see. But only if you're ready. Imagine looking into someone's eyes and feeling nothing. No warmth, no tension, no subtle flicker of being. Just a still, polished surface staring back, like glass that doesn't reflect you. You tell yourself they're just tired, distracted, maybe going through something. But deep inside, you know that silence behind the gaze isn't emotional. It's existential. Most people believe the soul is something we all naturally have, like a heart or a brain. But what if that isn't true? What if some people around you, even the ones who sleep beside you, are moving through life without that inner spark, without what we call presence? Dr. Martha Stout, in her groundbreaking book, The Sociopath Next Door, said that around 1 in 25 people simply don't have a conscience. Not a damaged one, a missing one. And conscience, in many spiritual traditions, is not just a moral compass, it's the echo of the soul. The eyes are supposed to be windows to the soul. But what if they're just empty frames? Researchers at MIT conducted a study in 2019 showing that people with low empathic response often exhibit unusual pupil dilation when confronted with emotionally charged images. Their body doesn't respond like ours. It's not just a lack of feeling, it's a different biological rhythm. A different type of being, one that mimics us perfectly until something breaks the script. You start noticing the details. They mirror your words, but not your emotion. They know the right thing to say, but their timing is always just a second too late. Their stories change subtly depending on who's listening. And when you confront them, really try to reach them, you're met not with resistance, but with eerie calm. As if they're watching you from the other side of a one-way mirror. Carl Jung spoke of people who have not yet individuated, those who operate entirely from the outer shell, never touching their true self. He described them as shadows of other people's projections. And it's no coincidence that spiritually awake individuals often say they feel when someone lacks essence. There's a coldness, a disconnection, like talking to a voice behind a locked door. A voice that's memorized empathy, but never actually tasted it. But there's something else, something even more unsettling. In moments of intimacy or vulnerability, moments where a soul should lean in, they pull away or go blank, not out of fear, but as if nothing inside them moves. That's when it begins to dawn on you. The person next to you might not be pretending. They might just be empty. And it's precisely at that point that reality begins to unravel. How can someone smile so perfectly and still feel so hollow? How can they touch you with such tenderness, yet never reach you? These aren't questions of psychology alone. They touch something deeper, something sacred. And the more you search for answers, the more the silence behind their eyes begins to speak. Not in words, but in the unbearable weight of what isn't there. You've met them before. Maybe you didn't realize it at the time. They spoke softly, maybe wore crystals, quoted Rumi, said things like, "You need to align with your higher self." And you believed them. Why wouldn't you? They sounded like a lighthouse, but you didn't notice that every time you left their presence, you felt smaller, diminished, drained. There's a kind of manipulation that's far more dangerous than overt control. It wears the clothes of wisdom. It uses the language of healing, and it hides behind spirituality. These people often aren't loud. They're performative healers, experts at disguising control as guidance. In the clinical world, psychologists have started identifying a pattern they call the dark empath. Someone who gets emotions deeply, but not to connect, to control. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a leading expert on narcissistic abuse, describes this type as the most insidious. They meditate, journal, and do breath work, not to become whole, but to build an identity that no one would ever suspect. On YouTube, several ex-followers of spiritual influencer Teal Swan have come forward with eerily similar stories. Emotional dependence disguised as awakening. Control masked as spiritual direction. Love that only existed when they were obedient. And there's a pattern in the subtle moments. When you questioned something they said, they didn't argue, they smirked. They told you your energy was off. When you cried, they offered no comfort, only silence cloaked in words like, "This is your shadow work." Spirituality became a tool to invalidate you, a weapon, not a path. Eastern philosophies speak of Maya, the illusion that blinds us. But what if the illusion isn't out there? What if it's the person sitting across from you, saying all the right things, but never once being them? Philosopher George Gurdjieff warned of humans who are asleep while walking, machines without self-remembering. And some of them learn to imitate the awakened. They read the same books, chant the same mantras, but nothing reaches the heart. Nothing changes in them, because there's no inner spark calling them back to truth. Only strategy, only performance. Spiritual bypassing taken to its darkest form. And what happens when you fall in love with someone like that? When your soul starts craving their approval, believing they're your teacher, your guide, you don't just lose energy, you lose clarity. You start doubting your intuition. You stop trusting your inner voice. But the most disturbing part? You may not even realize it's happening until it's too late. Because when someone wears light as a disguise, the shadows they cast are almost impossible to detect. And if their light isn't real, then what exactly are they guiding you into? If they speak about love, but leave you feeling hollow, who exactly are they serving? There's a silence more painful than any argument. It's the silence that happens when you pour your heart out and the person across from you just blinks. Not in cruelty, not even in anger, just indifference. Like your emotions are background noise, static on a screen they've already tuned out. And still, they say they love you. It's easy to confuse emotional availability with quietness, with stoicism. But something changes when love becomes one-sided, not in words, but in resonance. You cry and they nod. You smile and they glance away. You ask how they feel and they say, "I'm fine," with the same tone they used to ask for the salt. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon under attachment trauma. But what if it goes deeper than trauma? What if it's the absence of soul awareness? Neuroscience gives us a curious clue. Mirror neurons, those tiny cells in the brain that light up when we observe someone's emotion, are responsible for empathy. But in people with psychopathic tendencies or deeply suppressed consciousness, those neurons barely activate. A study at the University of Groningen found that individuals with empathy deficits show delayed or even reversed emotional recognition. They don't just fail to feel, they fail to see what others feel. Carl Jung described it in spiritual terms. He said the soul lives through connection, that without reflection from another, we become unanchored. But in his darker writings, he warned of something more unsettling: people who serve as mirrors only for themselves. They reflect nothing back. A black glass, cold, non-responsive, not because they won't, but because they can't. On TikTok, the hashtag #EmptyPartner has exploded with stories. One woman described how, during her miscarriage, her fiancé patted her on the shoulder, said everything happens for a reason, and went back to watching TV. No anger, no grief, just vacancy. She said it was the moment she realized she was emotionally alone, even in the arms of someone she called home. And the truth no one wants to say out loud is this: some people don't feel the way you feel, not because they're broken, but because the soul that gives warmth to love may never have fully arrived in them. Or worse, it left long ago. And if your love hits a wall that never responds, never adapts, never grows, what exactly are you loving? What happens when the mirror goes dark, and all you're left with is your own reflection, begging to be seen? There's something unsettling about people who never change. Years pass, circumstances shift, life demands transformation, and yet they stay exactly the same. Same opinions, same responses, Same stories told with the same rhythm. It's not consistency, it's repetition, as if they're stuck in a loop they can't perceive. Or worse, they were never meant to perceive it. Quantum psychology introduces a concept that rattles the foundation of what we call free will. It suggests that without conscious self-awareness, most humans operate like biological software, complex, reactive, but ultimately predictable. The psychologist Carl Jung hinted at this when he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But what if some people never can bring that unconscious into light? Dolores Cannon, through decades of quantum hypnosis sessions, documented thousands of cases where clients describe encounters with what they called background people, figures in their lives who felt scripted, emotionless, hollow. These weren't ghosts or hallucinations. They were coworkers, spouses, neighbors. Cannon insisted these reports weren't metaphorical. The subjects spoke as if they had simply woken up and noticed something was terribly off. In neuroscience, this phenomenon echoes in a different language. Studies show that up to 95% of human behavior is unconscious. But when that percentage rises beyond a threshold, when everything is automatic, what's left of the person? A man posted on a private consciousness forum that his wife would say the exact same 3 phrases during every disagreement, no matter the topic, word for word. For 10 years, he described it as like arguing with an AI that couldn't update. And this idea that some humans are merely playing out pre-programmed scripts has been echoed across cultures. In ancient Gnostic texts, certain beings were described as hylics, souls so buried in matter they never remembered who they were. Not evil, not cruel, just unawakened, acting out lives without ever stepping into them. So, if someone you love repeats the same emotional patterns year after year, if their reactions never evolve, if their inner world feels closed off, what are you really witnessing? Personality? Trauma? Or a program running with no operator? Because when presence is absent and behavior runs like clockwork, you have to ask yourself one terrifying question. Who's actually in there? If anyone at all? You might imagine them as loud, chaotic, manipulative. But the ones who drain you the most often come in silence. They smile gently, they listen well, they seem calm, even serene. And yet, after an hour with them, you feel heavy, dull, like the color has been quietly bled out of your day. They didn't yell, they didn't criticize, but something was taken. Not all energy vampires are aggressive. Some are wounded, others are simply unaware. But a third kind exists, the kind that drains not out of need, but because they don't know how to generate their own light. Dr. Christiane Northrup calls these people psychic parasites, not as an insult, but as an energetic truth. They feed off the subtle force of others, not maliciously, but instinctively, like shadow plants that grow only by leaning into someone else's sun. On Reddit's r/spirituality forum, dozens of users describe this exact sensation. I don't know why, but after being with him, I feel tired for 2 days. Or she's so sweet, but after every conversation, I want to lie down and cry. No name calling, just patterns, subtle, repeated patterns of depletion. What unites these stories? The other person's emotional absence, a kind of unconscious hunger masked by stillness. Eastern traditions have long warned of this. In certain tantric texts, there's a term for it, prana snatching, when the life force of one is absorbed by another without physical contact. It's often unconscious, a byproduct of deep spiritual disconnection. Yoga teacher Brett Larkin once recounted how a student would sit next to her in every class, never speak, but afterwards, she'd always leave completely exhausted. When that student stopped coming, the fatigue vanished. And here lies the mystery. Not every vampire bears fangs. Some look like healers. Some say nothing at all. Their presence isn't loud, but it's heavy. Their silence doesn't soothe, it consumes. And over time, you begin to question your own energy, your own mood, your own center, not realizing that someone else has been quietly siphoning what you've worked so hard to cultivate. But what if the person who leaves you feeling broken never touched you at all? What if their hunger was spiritual and their silence was a feeding ground? You might be protecting your heart, but are you guarding your energy? There are moments that change people, and then there are moments that replace them. You see it in their eyes first. Something quiet, something off. Not sadness, not confusion, just absence. They speak the same, they remember everything. But the way they look at you feels unfamiliar. The warmth is gone, the rhythm is wrong, and suddenly you're left wondering, where did the person I knew go? The walk-in theory isn't new. In spiritual circles, it's whispered as one of those truths too strange to accept, but too consistent to ignore. Ruth Montgomery, a former journalist turned metaphysical author, described in a 2003 interview how souls can step out of a body, voluntarily or through trauma, and be replaced by another. The memories remain, the habits too, but the essence changes. It's not possession, it's permission. One woman on a podcast shared her experience after her husband's car crash. No major injuries, no memory loss, no physical damage. But afterward, he stopped playing their favorite songs, forgot their routines. His laugh changed. She said, "It's like someone else came home in his body." Doctors found nothing, but spiritually, everything was different. He was calmer, colder, emotionally unrecognizable. In Vedic philosophy, the soul has contracts, agreements to learn, to love, to evolve. But when a contract ends early, some believe the soul may depart, leaving an opening. And sometimes another soul enters not to harm, but to fulfill a purpose the previous one could not. Yet from the outside, this change is subtle. It hides in the way someone stops asking the questions they used to ask, stops looking at you like they once did. But the implications are profound. If your partner, your friend, your child can remain physically the same, yet spiritually be someone else, how can you ever be sure who you're truly speaking to? Is it still love if the soul that received it is no longer the one giving it back? And if souls can leave without warning, who's to say the one you loved hasn't already gone? Because sometimes the greatest loss isn't when someone dies. It's when they stay, but aren't really there anymore. Not all truths come with thunder. Some arrive in the smallest moments. A broken glass on the floor, a sigh you didn't mean to release, the flicker of sadness in your eyes when you think no one's watching. And if the person next to you doesn't flinch, doesn't pause, doesn't even notice, it may be more than inattentiveness. It may be a sign their soul never fully arrived. Empathy isn't just an emotion. It's a signal of consciousness. Neuroscientists have traced it to mirror neurons, cells that light up when we witness another person in pain or joy. But beyond the brain, there's something subtler at play: energetic resonance. Some people feel what you feel before you speak. Others hear every word and still feel nothing. And that difference isn't just psychological, it's spiritual. Trauma therapists often use what's called attunement to gauge presence, tracking how a person responds not just to words, but to shifts in breath, posture, even energy. Jenna Sophia, a relationship coach on TikTok, offered a simple test: drop something by accident, or suddenly go silent. Watch their body. Do they freeze with you? Or do they carry on like nothing happened? Real connection has weight. Real awareness can't ignore it. There was a man who shared his story on Facebook. He was grieving the loss of his father and began to cry while talking about it. His partner stood still, stared at him blankly, and asked, "Will you be okay by Monday?" That's not cruelty. That's disconnection. The inability or refusal to meet another being's emotional frequency. And it's in those moments we realize presence can't be faked. Spiritual traditions from Buddhism to Kabbalah speak of kavana, a kind of intentional presence that binds the soul to action. Without it, gestures are hollow, conversations are transactional, and touch becomes meaningless. If someone consistently fails to meet you in emotion, is it because they're distracted? Or because their consciousness never truly descended into the body? You can fake words, you can fake kindness, but you can't fake the stillness that happens when someone's soul meets yours. And if they can't meet you there, even once, what are they really meeting you with? Because sometimes it's not what they say. It's what they failed to feel that tells the whole story. It begins in the quietest hours, when the conscious mind lets go and only the truth remains. You wait to hear whispering beside you, words that make no sense, a name repeated over and over, or worse, a strange, foreign language from a tongue that, hours earlier, claimed ignorance. And in that half-lit moment, something deep in your chest knows, this isn't just sleep. This is something else. In the spiritual world, it's long been said that sleep is not merely rest, it's a passage. Mystics from the Sufi and Vedic traditions believe that each night, the soul temporarily departs the body, reconnecting with deeper realms. But what if it doesn't come back? Or worse, what if something else returns in its place? That question became chillingly real for a man on Reddit who described his girlfriend speaking fluent German in her sleep, despite never having studied the language. When confronted, she didn't panic. She just stared blankly, not confused, not scared, just vacant. Science steps in with its own unsettling clues. In a 2018 study published in Sleep Medicine, researchers found that people with high dissociative tendencies exhibited unusual movements and vocalizations during REM sleep, behaviors often disconnected from any dream content. Psychologically, it's a form of fragmentation. Spiritually, it might be something else, an invitation, a doorway, or maybe a swap. Author Robert Moss, known for his work on conscious dreaming, has warned of soul travelers, beings who use the dream state to step into other bodies, even temporarily. Sound far-fetched? Perhaps, but the accounts are consistent. Not loud, not violent, just wrong. Slight shifts in voice, breathing that feels unfamiliar, energy that no longer matches the person you fell asleep beside. You think it's your partner, but when they sleep, you feel watched. You try to wake them, but they resist with a strength that's not theirs. Their face is calm but cold, and when they open their eyes, it takes a few seconds too long for recognition to return. If it does at all, what are you sharing a bed with? A person? A vessel? A mask that only functions in daylight? And if the soul leaves every night, who or what has permission to slip in while the body sleeps? Because maybe the scariest part isn't the voice you hear at 3 a.m. It's the sudden, quiet feeling that the person lying beside you isn't who you thought they were. What if the reason they never change is because they weren't designed to? What if the strange detachment you feel around them isn't just emotional distance, but the echo of something artificial? Some people walk through life with such mechanical rhythm, such perfect social scripting, that eventually you start to wonder, are they even real in the same way you are? This isn't just science fiction anymore. Elon Musk once said there's a 1 in billions chance we're not living in a simulation. But the idea didn't begin with him. Philosophers like Nick Bostrom and ancient mystics alike have questioned the structure of this reality. And within those theories emerges a disturbing possibility that some people around you aren't conscious players. They're background characters, placeholders, or as some call them, non-player characters. You'll find hundreds of stories in the Reddit forum r/glitch_and_the_matrix describing eerily robotic behavior. Coworkers who say the exact same phrase at the same time each day, strangers who seem to freeze mid-sentence, or loved ones who suddenly feel like they're acting instead of being. One woman wrote that her sister repeated an entire 3-minute conversation, word for word, a week later. Same tone, same pauses. And when confronted, she simply laughed and walked away. This brings us to an ancient concept rarely discussed outside closed circles. In certain Gnostic texts, there is mention of soulless vessels, humanoid entities born into this world to serve the structure of reality itself, not to awaken within it. Not evil, not possessed, just blank. Their role? To mirror, to provoke, to test. They move by scripts, and the reason they never meet you in depth is because there is no depth to meet. And yet these beings can still say, I love you. They can smile, make eye contact, share a meal. But when you talk about the things that move you, the soul deep moments, the shifts, the awakenings, they glaze over. Or worse, they smile politely, as if what you said was merely decorative. You search their face for response, for recognition, but what stares back is structure, not presence. So what happens if you're in a relationship with one of these scripted beings? How long can you walk beside someone who was never meant to awaken? And if your reality is being tested through their stillness, what exactly are you being prepared for? They never raise their voice. They never break a rule. They always say thank you, and they never forget your birthday. From the outside, they are perfect. And yet, when you're with them, something feels off. The kindness feels like theater. Their smile is always identical. No depth, no charge, like a portrait painted too clean, too quiet, too careful. Psychologists at the University of British Columbia uncovered a curious paradox in a 2015 study. Individuals who score high on agreeableness, those overly polite, conflict-avoiding types, sometimes hide darker traits, including manipulation and repressed hostility. It's not the loud ones you need to watch. It's the ones who never flinch, never challenge, never feel. Because beneath the softness, there may be nothing at all. Alan Watts warned us about this. In one of his lectures, he said, "Beware of the man who is too good, for he has not yet met his shadow." Politeness, he explained, is not a virtue when it comes at the cost of presence. When someone never disagrees, never reacts, never exposes their real thoughts, it might not be peace. It might be absence. A woman shared on Facebook that she spent 8 years with a man who never raised his voice, not once. But when she cried after losing her job, he sat silently. When she tried to open up about a painful childhood memory, he said, "Don't let the past define you," and walked away. Always respectful, always gentle. And yet she said, "I've never felt so completely alone in the company of another human being." Japanese philosophy teaches about tape-mei, the public face we wear. But when someone lives entirely in that face, never letting the inner truth emerge, the soul itself begins to disappear. Because a soul is messy. It trembles. It questions. It reveals. And if someone refuses to show anything but smoothness, maybe it's because there's nothing else inside. So next time someone smiles at all the right moments, says all the right things, but never truly meets your gaze, ask yourself, is this grace or is this mask? And if it's just a mask, what are they hiding underneath the silence? There's a certain emptiness that doesn't come from silence, it comes from absence. You speak from your heart, but their eyes remain still, not confused, just disengaged. And when you ask, "What are you thinking?" they answer with a shrug, or worse, nothing. At first, you assume they're just distracted. But what if the real answer is far stranger? In 2020, a viral Twitter thread unraveled a startling truth. Not everyone has an inner voice. Some people move through life with no internal monologue, no narrator, no echo, no reflection. Neuroscientist Dr. Russell Hurlburt has spent years researching this, and his findings are unsettling. In his studies, a significant portion of people reported they do not hear themselves think at all. Just images, or nothing, blank screens. But spiritual traditions have long linked the inner voice to the soul's whisper. Socrates called it his daimonion, the invisible guide that corrected his path. Jung believed our inner dialogue was a manifestation of the self communicating with ego. Without it, how do we question ourselves? How do we choose to evolve? And if someone never hears that internal conversation, are they truly choosing anything? A man on YouTube shared his story. His partner of 3 years admitted she had no thoughts unless someone spoke to her. It was like she only existed when reflected by others, he said. No goals, no dreams, no opinion unless I gave her one first. He thought it was low self-esteem until he realized it was something deeper, a kind of mental hollowness that never filled. There's a spiritual weight to inner dialogue. It's where guilt lives, where desire forms, where we negotiate meaning, morality, memory. Remove that voice and what remains? Just behavior, automatic reactions, like a beautifully programmed machine, capable of smiling but incapable of reflection. So if the person next to you always agrees, always pauses before answering, always seems to echo your mind, but never speaks from theirs, ask yourself, are you in a dialogue? Or are you speaking into a void that only looks like a person? And if the echo never returns, is it because there's no one there to send it back? Not all absences are sudden. Some happen slowly, like a dimming light you didn't notice at first. You watch someone change after pain. They speak less. Their gaze shifts. They're still there, physically, but something no longer connects. And as days pass, their energy fades into routine, detachment, and emotional distance. You reach for them, but what you touch feels like the shell of who they once were. Peter Levine, the founder of Somatic Experiencing, speaks of trauma not as a psychological wound, but as a soul-level freeze. He describes how certain shocks, loss, violence, abandonment can cause parts of our consciousness to disconnect from the body in order to survive. Spiritually, this is known as fragmentation, a phenomenon recognized in shamanic traditions for centuries. Sandra Ingerman, a practicing shaman and psychotherapist, teaches about soul retrieval, the process of reintegrating pieces of the self that split off during deep suffering. But here's the part no one talks about. Some people never retrieve those pieces. They don't even realize they're missing. They keep moving, smiling, living, but the inner presence is gone, and the people who love them are left trying to hug a ghost. A woman shared on Reddit that after her boyfriend witnessed a violent robbery, he stopped laughing, stopped asking questions. He didn't cry, she wrote. He didn't rage. He just flattened. No diagnosis, no therapy, just this quiet vacancy that settled between them like fog. She said it felt like she was dating a memory, and science quietly agrees. Brain scans of PTSD survivors show disruptions in the prefrontal cortex and limbic system, areas tied to emotion, empathy, and awareness. But spiritual teachers go further. They suggest that in extreme cases, the soul does not return fully after trauma. It lingers elsewhere, watching, waiting. So if the person you love has lost their color, their curiosity, their very presence, could it be that their soul is still in exile? And if so, who or what is living in their place now? There's a quiet discomfort that comes from being with someone who never gets upset. No matter what happens, betrayal, disappointment, deep emotional friction, they smile, nod, say it's okay. At first, it feels like maturity, peace even, but over time it starts to feel vacant. Because beneath that calm, there's something missing, something essential, their fire. Carl Jung warned us clearly. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What he meant was simple. Without owning our anger, our pain, our raw emotional truth, we don't become more spiritual. We become more divided. And those who never express any anger at all may not be more evolved. They may be more disconnected. In a 2003 study by psychologists James Gross and Oliver John, people who consistently suppressed anger were found to experience lower emotional intimacy in relationships and higher rates of dissociation. Not only do they struggle to express feelings, they eventually struggle to feel them. And when someone avoids all friction, it's not always compassion. Sometimes, it's a sign the self is shut down. One woman posted on Instagram about her ex-husband, 8 years together, and not once had he raised his voice. But when her father died, he didn't hold her. He just offered logistical help. It felt like I was grieving next to a very polite robot, she wrote. His tone never changed. His smile never faded, not even at the funeral. In Buddhist teachings, true peace comes from facing the mind, not bypassing it. Anger, when owned and transformed, becomes clarity, protection, fire. But someone who never expresses it, who shows no shadow, no resistance, no heat, may be hiding a fractured self. Or worse, may not be fully present to begin with. Because when someone never gets angry, never shakes, never burns, you have to ask, are they peaceful? Or have they just disappeared behind the mask of control? And if there's no shadow, is there even a soul left to cast one? There's a moment, usually small, almost forgettable, when you catch them staring into the mirror just a little too long. Their expression is blank. Their lips are moving. Maybe they're whispering something to themselves, something you can't hear. You call their name, and they blink, slowly, like waking up. But what were they doing in that silence? And more importantly, who were they becoming? In Jungian psychology, identity is not a single solid structure. It's a constellation of selves, slowly brought into harmony through self-awareness. But when trauma or repression blocks that process, something strange happens. The psyche begins to fragment. The person you're with may still function, but their soul no longer sits at the center. What remains is a composite, half routines, half performance. A user on Reddit described how her boyfriend would often whisper in the mirror. At first, she thought it was a mantra or affirmation, until one night she heard what he was actually saying. "You are Michael. You're still Michael. Don't forget." She said his voice changed during those whispers, deeper, flatter. And when she asked about it, he laughed it off, but his eyes never matched the smile. Quantum consciousness theorists like Penrose and Hameroff suggest that identity itself may depend on quantum coherence within the brain. When that coherence is lost through trauma, illness, or prolonged disconnection, consciousness may become scattered. The body remains, but the unified sense of self dissolves. What you see in the mirror is only a reflection of fragments. Spiritual systems echo this in their own language. Sufi mystics speak of the nafs, layers of the soul that must be aligned for true presence. If someone lives only in the lower nafs, fear, desire, image, they might appear functional, even charming. But there's no center, no truth, just shifting roles played to survive the day. So when you notice their personality flicker, when their eyes go blank during ordinary conversations, when their presence feels scattered even in stillness, you have to wonder, are you loving a person? Or are you trying to hold together the pieces of a soul that no longer remembers how to be? Because sometimes the reflection in the mirror isn't distorted. It's just incomplete. Pain reveals what words never could. It strips away the polished exterior, the rehearsed responses, the masks we wear for comfort. When life breaks open, when grief, fear, or sudden chaos comes crashing in, something inside us either rises or disappears. And it's in those fragile moments that you begin to truly see who someone is, or if they were ever really there at all. There's a story shared by a woman on YouTube that still echoes online. She had a full-blown panic attack, heart racing, hands shaking, sobbing uncontrollably. She called her husband. He answered, listened, and calmly replied, "Call me back when you're calm." Then he hung up. He didn't check in. He didn't come home. She said, "That night, I realized I wasn't married to someone cold. I was married to someone empty." Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "Suffering is the ultimate test of the soul. In moments of true crisis, a soul responds instinctively, not with solutions, but with presence." But what if presence never arrives? What if the person beside you stands still, emotionless, when everything inside you is collapsing? Not out of shock, not out of fear, but because their inner world never had the depth to reach yours. Field psychologists have studied this reaction. The freeze response is common in trauma, but that's different from chronic emotional vacancy. If someone always withdraws when real feeling enters the room, when life demands authentic response, then we're no longer looking at fear. We're looking at absence, a gap where empathy should be, a hollow where the soul was expected to show up. These people may function perfectly in normal life. They're good in routine, great in plans, even warm in small doses. But when reality hits hard and something primal is needed, comfort, outrage, grief, they don't move. They don't react, because there's nothing inside them that recognizes what's at stake. And that's when the illusion shatters. Because in those moments, those real, trembling moments where the soul must rise or disappear, if they give you silence, if they offer nothing, if they just watch, you might finally understand the one truth no one ever dared to say. The person you love may never have had a soul to begin with. They know how to smile at the right moment. They tilt their head when you speak. They even ask the right questions about your day, your fears, your dreams. But something inside you hesitates, not because of what they're doing, but because of what you don't feel. There's no weight behind their words, no pull behind their touch, just the cold precision of someone who has learned what love is supposed to look like. The idea of the soul copy is rarely spoken aloud, but many people live next to it every day. In psychology, it's sometimes described as role-locked behavior, when a person mimics emotion and humanity through learned patterns but lacks a true center of self. They reflect others flawlessly, but initiate nothing from within. They're charming, attentive, but eerily hollow, as if they've downloaded someone else's soul and forgot to install the real thing. A man once posted on r/narcissistic abuse about his ex-wife. He wrote that she was brilliant in social settings, could disarm anyone with her calm, authentic tone. But over time, he noticed she mirrored people too well. Around him, she was deep and quiet. Around his brother, sarcastic and witty. Around her coworkers, spiritual and wise. None of it overlapped. He began to realize none of it was hers. Spiritual traditions speak of beings who imitate but do not originate. In ancient Gnostic texts, the archons were described as shadow intelligences, entities without creative force, sustained only by imitation. Some mystics believed these forces could enter the human world through consciousness that never fully anchored. Could it be that some people born of flesh exist as echoes rather than emitters? You'll know them by their stillness. Not peace, but vacancy. When you're vulnerable, they respond. But it feels more like a calculated reply than a shared experience. Their empathy is too symmetrical. Their compliments sound memorized. And when you tell them something personal, their eyes register it, but their energy doesn't shift. It's not that they're pretending. It's that they don't know how else to be. But here's the part no one warns you about. The longer you're around them, the more you begin to doubt yourself. Your instincts go quiet. Your intuition dims. Because something in your nervous system senses you're in the presence of a person who appears fully alive, but does not resonate. And it's precisely at that point that your reality starts to crack, not from what's missing in them, but from what you begin to lose in yourself. So ask yourself, do they only ever reflect what you project? And if they stop mirroring you, would anything remain behind their eyes? Some truths don't scream. They flicker. In the tiny pauses, the subtle looks, the moments when a real soul would feel with you without needing to speak. But if you pay attention closely enough, you'll notice something unnerving. Certain people don't react to real emotion. Not with resistance, not with empathy, just nothing. Like static in human form. You break down, they blink. You laugh, they nod. You get quiet, and they stay exactly the same. No micro-expression. No physical lean in. No matching of energy. Dr. Paul Ekman, the pioneer of micro-expression research, once said, "Emotion always leaves a trace unless there's nothing there to register it." In other words, the absence of response may say more than 1,000 words ever could. Psychologist Stephen Porges developed the polyvagal theory to describe how our nervous systems attune to others. When someone cares, truly, their body responds. Pupils shift, breathing changes, voice softens, but the spiritually disconnected have a flat field. They don't react because their inner world isn't participating. It's as if their body is running a simulation of presence, but the core is disengaged. Empaths online often describe this pattern in their partners. He never reacted when I cried. She would just stare at me, no shift, not even a blink. These aren't just signs of detachment. They're signs of something deeper, non-involvement of the soul. Because real presence moves. It responds without effort. It echoes the sacred aliveness of being. Want to know if someone's soul is with you? Watch what they do in micro moments. When you sigh unexpectedly, when your energy drops, when you laugh suddenly, do they attune without words? Or do they keep their emotional temperature locked in place, unchanged, unshaken? The answers live in the quietest seconds. But there's something even more chilling. If they never miss a beat, if they always say the right thing, but their body never aligns with the moment, you might not be in the presence of awareness. You might be in the presence of a mask. And if the soul doesn't rise when emotion enters the room, is it even there at all? At first, it all makes sense. They share stories from their childhood, their teenage years, early relationships. The details seem clear. Their timelines line up. But as time passes, something strange begins to surface. Their memories feel flat, like they're telling you a story they've rehearsed. And when you ask deeper questions, something in their face hardens or goes blank. Memory is more than information. It's emotion carried through time. When people speak from the soul, their stories ripple with feeling, shifts in tone, pauses, moments of quiet where old emotions resurface. But when someone shares a memory without any emotional trace, it raises a deeper question. Did they actually live it? Or are they simply repeating something they've decided to believe? Psychologists studying confabulation, a phenomenon where individuals unintentionally fabricate memories, have found that these people often feel no guilt, not because they're liars, but because they're disconnected from their own inner narrative. It's not deception, it's absence. And when that becomes chronic, it can create the illusion of a person who has history but no depth. One woman, in a viral YouTube video, shared how her partner told for completely different stories about his childhood, depending on who was in the room. Not little details, whole different emotions. In one version, he was neglected. In another, deeply loved. When she asked which was true, he shrugged and said, "It doesn't really matter now, does it?" But to her, it felt like staring into a mirror that couldn't reflect anything real. Spiritual teachers often speak of memory as soul-anchored experience. In Kabbalistic and Sufi traditions, memory isn't just recall, it's a sacred thread, tying the soul back to its own unfolding. When that thread is broken or artificially constructed, the being that remains may look complete, but it's spiritually adrift. They can tell you about the past, but they cannot feel it. So when someone's life story feels rehearsed, when they speak in perfect anecdotes but never shift emotionally, never pause in real reflection, ask yourself, is this memory? Or is this a costume stitch from borrowed timelines? And if nothing in their past truly belongs to them, then who or what has been walking beside you all this time? You walk into the room and everything feels fine until they enter. Then the atmosphere shifts. The warmth drains. Your chest tightens, your stomach turns, and for no clear reason, you just want to leave. It's not what they say. It's not what they do. It's what they carry. Or maybe what they don't carry. Because some people don't radiate energy. They absorb light without giving any back. In bioenergetic fields, this is called the cold aura. It's not just a metaphor. Kirlian photography, a method developed in the 1930s to visualize energy fields around living beings, has repeatedly shown that some individuals emit nearly no energetic feedback. While most people's auras respond to mood and physical state, certain individuals remain dim, colorless, even in states of stimulation. The question is, why? Barbara Brennan, former NASA physicist turned energy healer, described these people in her clinical observations as energetically absent. Not blocked, not wounded, but missing. She wrote, "No light reaches inward. No light radiates outward. Their field is like fog trapped in glass." Spiritual leaders like Sadhguru have echoed this, explaining that energy presence is a direct consequence of consciousness. If someone is not awake, their energy won't move. Across online forums, empaths report eerily similar sensations: headaches, sudden fatigue, or even nausea around certain people who seem perfectly pleasant. A massage therapist once wrote that one of her clients felt like stone, energetically flat, like the body had no life beneath the skin. She said she had to ground herself for hours afterward, not from negativity, but from emptiness. And the most haunting part? These individuals often function perfectly. They make eye contact. They smile on cue. But the body knows. The field knows. Their aura doesn't meet yours. It repels, or worse, absorbs without returning, like a spiritual vacuum dressed in human form. So the next time someone's presence leaves you feeling drained, not hurt, not attacked, but erased, listen to what your field is telling you. Because energy doesn't lie. And when someone carries no warmth, no resonance, no energetic hum, you may not be looking at a soul at all. You may be standing in front of something that feels like silence wearing skin.